back with another helpful round of Miniature Dork Universe. I was asked, this will be another request video, so I was asked about how I put decals on my tanks. Okay, so before we go any farther, this weekend there's a motorcycle convention in Digby, and I am on the highway to Digby, so you might hear the odd motorcycle go by. For that, I apologize. So here we go back. Yeah, I was asked to show how I apply decals to my models and get them to look nice and flat so that they look painted on. And there's just a few simple steps overall. So we'll get into that. I would say first though, when you're doing your vehicles, one of the things I see a lot is people do a really good painting job, but they haven't really researched the markings on the vehicles, so they, it kind of undermines, the otherwise accurate painting job. So, get a book on the vehicle that you're marking in the campaign that you're wargaming in, because that will help you get a feel for the way the vehicles looked and how they were marked. And on the lucky side, if you hate putting decals on vehicles, you can get away with very few. I mean, I like to mark up my vehicles as much as I can because I feel like it gives them a bit of character. However, when I do look at actual wartime photographs, it seems like most of these vehicles were rushed into service so quickly that the units didn't even have time to mark them. And that seems consistent through every single army. So, for example, British and Commonwealth vehicles, they have a lot of different markings available or possible on them, like bridge classification numbers, War Department numbers, squadron signs, air recognition symbols, individual names for the tanks. There's a lot you can put on, but when you actually look at photographs, it seems like you might get a War Department number and an aerial recognition star or something, and that's it. And same with German vehicles. You might see the Balkan Cruise and maybe a divisional logo, but often not. They just painted it up and fired it onto the field. So I mean, you could get away with very minimal decals, and you can always personalize your tanks in other ways than putting markings on, just with stowage and different camouflage and what have you. But I'm not trying to discourage the use of decals. I think they look great, especially when you do them right. So research would be the first. Make sure you understand, say for the Germans, how the tanks are properly numbered and things like that, and then move from there. Next, I've bought a shit ton of decals. Like I go through online and I see places, and I buy different sizes. Like you can buy smaller scale decals, like these ones here are, I think, for like 10 millimeter scale, but they also work great for 15 millimeter. Sometimes vehicles just put smaller decals on, or they're good for armored half tracks, for example. So I just pull together a bunch of decals so that I can sort of pick and choose and decide which ones will look best with the tank I'm making. So today I'm going to paint or put decals on these ones. This one was recently in my tutorial on using blue tack for painting. It's a Sturmpanzer IV. So we'll put decals on him. He was very basic. So I'm doing an actual unit with this guy. I think it was the 217 Sturmpanzer Abteilung that was around in Normandy facing the Canadians during Operation Total Eyes. And then they were around for the remainder of the Northwest Europe campaign, in Belgium and Germany. So I'll show you how I'm going to go about that. I'm also going to do another one of my Panzer IVs. I'm getting a platoon of those ready, and I'll throw one on a couple basic license plates on this Opel Blitz. So you notice that they have a glossy sheen, and that's the first step to doing your decals. And for that, I just use Tamiya Clear, because I use Tamiya paints for my airbrushing. I find they have the strongest finish. The paint doesn't scrape off, and it's great for airbrushing. So I give it a coat of clear. This shiny sort of surface will allow the decals to sit better and to allow less air underneath the decal, so you won't get silvering and bubbles. It'll lay nice and flat on this shiny surface. And then I use a decal set. So even if you have a really bumpy texture, those decals will set into that bumpy texture. And I'll show pictures at the end of some of those really tough areas that I've used this Microsolve, I think it's called. I'll just pull it out here quickly. No, sorry, it's Solvaset. Solvaset. This stuff is great. I've never had a problem with Solvaset, and I've had this bottle of Solvaset for well over, like probably over 10 years. Jesus, now that I think of it, and it's still got about half the bottle. So you look at everything I've done, it's had Solvaset on it, and this is the same bottle that I got back in, you know, like 2004 or something like that. So what I'm going to do is select the decals that I'm going to use for these tanks. This particular unit, there's only the German Balkan Cruise on it. There's not any sort of tactical markings. I might put a Sturmpanzer marking on it too, like a tactical marking for a Sturmpanzer unit. I'm just going to double check that. Like I said earlier, I like to put tons of markings on. Oops, sorry, we're going out of focus. Because I find it gives the tanks a lot of personality. So we'll leave it at that. I'm just going to fiddle around with some things, and then we'll pick it up soon. Let's talk about the tools that we want to use when we're applying decals. There's just a few of them, but they are quite important. So firstly, you want good quality scissors. In fact, for everything you do, I recommend getting good quality. There's sometimes in painting it's good to have a shitty brush, and there are times when you want a crappier tool if the tool's going to get wrecked. But for the most part, get the best tools that you can with the money you've got, because they're going to work better, you're going to have a better outcome, and it'll just be a more satisfying experience using, you know, good tools. So get a good pair of sharp scissors. These ones aren't too big, and you don't want them too large for doing small scale, because you won't see what the hell you're working on, which is important. Secondly, this is a sculpting tool. You don't have to have this particular sculpting tool, or you don't even really need a sculpting tool, but what you need is something. I use these to move the decals around on the vehicle once they're placed. If I have to make edits, you want something that's got a fairly smooth edge so that you don't end up scraping off the paint of your vehicle. And having said that, when I feel this, it's a little bit rough. So I'm actually going to just grab a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm going to smooth that off. And it's important, make sure that thing is smooth, because yeah, you want this to look cool, not like some crappy, you know, we've gone through all this effort to paint it. Let's make sure we don't scratch that paint off. Sorry, I'm getting out of focus here. Stupid camera doesn't really track well. It has like a focus zone, and that's where it stays. Maybe I should invest in a better camera for doing this kind of stuff. So yeah, I've rounded that off a little bit, got any of the extra crap off. I just use 400 sandpaper, because the sandpaper can also put a texture in this thing, which will also scrape up your vehicle. The other thing you're going to want is a really good pair of tweezers, because sometimes, probably not a decal of this size, but sometimes the real tiny ones want to be real fucking dicks, and you can't get them on the paintbrush, and you can just literally grab the decal in the tweezers and place it onto a vehicle with the tweezers. So yeah, make sure you have good tweezers. These ones got a little bent, which is a bit disconcerting. So we'll bend them back. You'll need a cotton swab, and get a fluffy cotton swab. There's some of those cotton swabs where it's kind of rough and tightly packed. No, fluffy one, like a fucking Q-tip. You'll hold it close to the decal, not on the decal, because if you hold it on the decal, it's very likely to move unless you can stay perfectly still. So I usually, when I'm trying to drain the water from behind the decal, I put it close, and it will start to suck that water up, which is what we want. You need a little dish for water. And I say a little dish because when you're using small decals, you don't want them to get lost in the dish. So it's just easier to have a little dish, and make sure you have a spot where you put all your backing paper when they're done. That's the scrap pile, and make sure it's a distinct pile, otherwise you'll get your small little decals mixed in with the scraps, and then that'll be chaos. Especially if you're doing, some of you guys I know, like, you paint like crazy and you do like 10 tanks at a time. So yeah, if you're doing that, make sure you have a very distinctive pile. Or in my case, when I'm doing like a British vehicle, I put tons of decals on it, and so I have lots of little scraps. It's really important. Set aside a scrap pile, or yeah, it's going to get confusing and crazy. Lastly, you're going to want two old, kind of crappier brushes. Not super crappy. You want the bristles still to be soft, but you know, if the points are long since gone, that's fine. We're going to actually apply the decals with one of the brushes, and then with the other brush we're going to put on our Solvaset. So yeah, make sure you have two, and have two different colors so that you know, oh, this was my Solvaset brush and this was my application brush. If you get them mixed up, it's not the end of the world. But on the smaller decals, that Solvaset will start working right away. So if you try to, you know, swipe the small decal, like a War Department number, off with this and place it, it might start to dissolve on the brush. So let's avoid that. Remember which brush is which. And so we shall begin. One of the reasons why we want nice scissors is because we want to cut as much of the carrier film off the decal as we can. These are Battlefront decals. These aren't like extra market part decals that I bought. The carrier films are a little bit thicker in this, and they tend to silver. So I'm going to cut it as close to the number without taking off. These black numbers have a white outline. I'm going to try not to take that white outline off. And we're just going to try to reduce as much of that carrier film as we can. You don't have to, you know, obviously do it perfectly. Like I'm not gonna take the contour around the two. I'm just gonna try, like I said, just to take off as much as I can within reason, without, you know, jeopardizing the decal and cutting into that. Now, you know, worst comes to worst, you cut into the decal, and what you're going to have to do is take, you know, to get the 2112, if, you know, it's essential that I'm using that number for this tank because I'm making a platoon. If I had cut through it, I could make up a new 2112 with some of the decals left, but it's kind of a pain in the ass because then you have to start cutting out individual numbers, and you have to space them similar to the other side. So try not to cut into your decals and try to keep them, again, as little carrier film on it as possible. So, you know, something like that's gonna be okay. So the next step is to just place it in some water. And see, you'll see the paper gets soaked. Once that paper's soaked, just drop my Q-tip in the water, you can take that out, and I just place it on my finger. And we're going to get the tank in question, which is this Jagged Panzer IV. So here's what his neighbor looks like, all decaled up. And I'm just giving him his number, which this one's number 212. I won't get into German numbering conventions, but if you want to find that kind of stuff out, there's a lot of information out there, especially on the web or books. And so I looked it up, and I've just determined that I can get the number sort of in the right spot just by being the back of the number just behind this third central sort of extra armor plate. So I'm going to wet up my application brush, and you'll notice the decal has come away from the paper. It's slipping around. Hopefully this is in focus. It's kind of hard to do this and put the decal on. So I'm going to just sweep that off onto the brush. It's that easy. And then I'm going to place it on the tank. Hopefully we stay in focus. Roughly where it needs to go. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now charge up your brush with lots of water, and let's get lots of water into that decal right now. And then we'll use our moving tool. And I'm going to look at its neighbor to see about how high. These things don't have to be super perfect either, because I doubt they were in real life. You know, they were given a stencil, throw this on the side of the tank roughly here. I'm pretty sure, I mean, who knows, maybe the Germans did, but I'm pretty sure they didn't get out there with rulers and levels and things to get these things exactly the same on every vehicle. It would not be practical. Especially the point of this number is just so that the platoon commanders and company commanders can see which vehicles are in their respective units. So there's 212 in place. And if you want to move it around some more, you can just charge it up with more water and move it around. But you want to be careful. The decal will get like weaker if you keep working it. So try to get the placement fairly quickly on. And I'm going to let that 212 sit for a bit before I hit it with the Solvaset. Now the directions for Solvaset are to put Solvaset on the area where the decal goes down, put the decal on, and then Solvaset on top. And I find when you do that, you can't reposition the decal. So you have to get the decal perfect at that when you do it that way. The way I do it, I position the decal and I just put the Solvaset on top, and I think capillary action draws that in behind the decal anyway, but I find that it sets just as well just to put a layer on top. And again, at the end of the video, I'll show you my stills of things where I've put this on over like an air intake or something on a turret, like the air vent, or on German Zimmerit, and it sets right into it like it's been painted on. So by no means do you need to put this on first and then the decal, and in fact I wouldn't recommend it, because like I said, it'll start to dissolve the decal right away and you'll never be able to position it. So you have to get it exactly perfect when you've put it down, and that's a little bit stressful, and to me I think that's not all that fucking fun. We don't want to stress too much. A little bit of stress is okay. Some of this stuff is kind of squirrely, but overall, I think we all prefer a smooth operation, not a freaking treachery. See, here we go. That's not even a motorcycle. That's some other fucking... There's a lot of there's a lot of these shitty cars and fucking loud motorcycles here. I'm starting to sound like an old guy, but seriously. Okay, so we'll put that 212 on. It's probably karma for all of my loud, crappy music that pisses people off. And it's like, you're gonna get bombarded with motorcycles and hot rods with fucking weird exhausts. So we've got that 212 on. I'm going to just to be honest, I don't really like loud noises, period. It's ironic that I play in a grindcore band, but you know, there's a time and place for things, right? When you're playing a live show and you've got earplugs in so that you're not destroying your freaking hearing, and everybody's chuffed and having a good time, it's a different story. But when you're trying to sit at home and make a fucking YouTube video and there's sports cars and motorcycles whizzing by, that's a bit different. So now I've taken the lid off my Solvaset, trying to get her in the camera, and I've got my Solvaset brush, and I'm just going to dip it in here and then just give it a nice coat of Solvaset, and just be careful not to move the decal around, because like I said, once the Solvaset gets on it, it's going to become increasingly difficult to change the positioning. So get it nice and gently applied. I'm just sort of dabbing a little bit. Make sure there's no air bubbles in the decal, which is another good reason to use brushes. So when you put it on with the brush, you can brush out the air bubbles as well. And you don't have to change tools or anything. You can just have that in your hand ready to go. So something I will say too about Solvaset is that when you put it on the decals, they're gonna bubble up like crazy. Oh shit, see, this one moved, fuck. They're gonna bubble up like crazy. Normally I let it sit for a bit longer before I put this on, but because I'm doing the decal, I went right in and did it. But that'll be okay. We'll just leave it like that. Yeah, I usually let this sit for about 5 minutes before I put the Solvaset on, because that allows the decal to almost dry on a little bit, and then the Solvaset will come in and do its thing. But yeah, right now it's all crackling up and bubbling up. Don't worry about that. It makes the decal really soft, and so that happens. But then when the Solvaset dries, it all smooths out. And once again, it looks really good. So that's how it's done to this point. I'm going to finish putting all the decals on my video, but I'm not going to, you know, it's very difficult to do it under the camera, but that's how it's done. If you were positioning it into a difficult area, again, you have your tools and what have you, but it's essentially the same as what I've just done here. So yeah, I'm going to go put the decals on, and then I'll show you the next step, what I do to seal them in. So here's the vehicles with the decals on. There's a tactical symbol with the number 2, which is for the second company, which is the first number in the 2112. The second number in the 2112, the number 1, indicates the tank platoon, and then the number after the 1, the other 2, represents the number of vehicle within the platoon. So this would be the second vehicle in the platoon. So this is second company, first platoon, second vehicle. This second vehicle is the late model Sturmpanzer IV, and it just has a couple Balkan crews. One is uncharacteristically placed on the driver's armored little block that comes out, and another on the back. I looked at pictures of vehicles from this unit. They characteristically had spare track links added to the sides with metal racks that were welded on. So a lot of it didn't leave room for any of the standard markings. I have another one of these vehicles to do too from the same unit without those spare tracks. So I'll put some crosses on the superstructure of the tank and maybe even some numbers. And then the other one was just an opal blitz, and it got the door stencil that had its weight and some of the specifications on a license plate on the front, and there's one on the back which I've just stuck to a bit of sheet styrene. Okay, so I've applied the decals, I put the setting solution on, and then I just painted another coat of Tamiya clear to seal it in. And you might see now that it's a little darker around the decal where I did that, but that's going to disappear when you hit it with a matte coat. So I didn't, record me painting clear on that, but I'm going to let you use your imagination for that one. I just brush painted it on. And now, having done this, the other thing I've kind of noticed, and I've noticed this in the past too, I used the decals from the Flames of War set that came with something, I think a bunch of Sturmgeschütz 3s. And the Flames of War decals do kind of wrinkle up a bit under the setting solution. Just a tiny amount. It's not a deal breaker, but yeah, other decals don't do that. You don't notice this once the matte coat goes on, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about decals that I really like that you can get. These are I-94 Enterprise makes these. This one is Romanian and Hungarian markings. I'll put the URL on the screen, so it's just going to flash up. Yeah, I like these. They handle the setting solution the best, and they sit the nicest, and they have a really wide range to choose from. I'm posting the URL because some people I've read on forums have trouble locating the actual store on the website. It is a little confusing. But they have multiple scales too, so if you're doing 20 millimeter or whatever, they have 20 millimeter, 15 and smaller predominantly. And some of the smaller sizes you can use for 15 mil too. Like the Division logos, they're a bit smaller, but that would be great if you're doing Jeeps or small armored cars. Same with the, there's fucking cars outside all the time, hot rods. The squadron symbols, yeah, you could easily use these on smaller vehicles, and they would actually be preferable. So yeah, check out the I-94 decals. These ones are good, and they have most nationalities and lots of cool sets like British and American tank names and different division logos. Yeah, lots of good stuff. There's a lot of 144 aircraft decals too if you're using those. Yeah, so that'll post up. So having applied the decals, I put some on this. There's not too many on the Sturmpanzer. There's just one at the front and one at the back. As per, I looked at an actual unit, the 217. So that was on a book about Sturmpanzers, and then on the Opal, I put on a license plate. Put this under the camera, and a door. I don't know. They put some kind of stencil on the door. I forget what it is. And then the rear license plate I haven't put on yet, but I just put the rear license plate on a piece of 0.3 mil plastic sheet, and I'll cut it out to the shape of the plate, paint the back black, and then just crazy glue it where the actual plate would go on. It's easier than trying to get the decal to sit on a spot where it doesn't fit and it will look like shit. This way it'll actually look pretty bloody good. So that's all I really do. The next steps are just painting steps. Once I have the decals on and sealed in, that's when I go with my washes, oil washes, and just go and do pin wash around the whole thing. I let the oil wash dry for a day or two, or sometimes longer. You know, if I do this on the weekend and then let it sit for 3 days, even better. I might do a tutorial on oil washes because I use oil paints. I've tried some of the acrylic washes and things, and I still find oil is the best. In fact, let's just say I will do a oil washes because a tube of oil paint, I have the same oil paint that I bought in 1992. And it's still, there's still the majority of the tube is still there. You know, you just need a little squirt of oil paint, and there's a little trick to it, but I will do a video on that. But a combination of cutting out that carrier film and then using that really good decal set that I showed you, you know, you'll get a nice flat looking painted on looking marking. Here was the truck. He's still being painted, getting closer, but it's going out of focus. Let's see if we can't get it lower. But there's the license plate on the front, and then there was just like a little door sort of stencil. I think it had the weight of the truck and its fuel and all that kind of shit. And then at the back, under here, it's hard to see this here, the license plate, that decal manufacturer I showed you, the I-94 Enterprises, they make a set of licenses. I think there might be some other license plate decal manufacturers out there if you look too. I think Skytrex has them. You can get SS decals and stuff. So what I do for these, when there's not an adequate spot for it, in this case I just put the decal on a piece of 0.3 millimeter plastic sheet, let the decal set. You know, I put the solva set on it as per normal, and then after it's cured or whatever, I put the gloss coat over it to seal it, and then I cut it out to shape. It's easy to cut out that 0.3 sheet. I paint the back and the sides of it black, and then I just crazy glue it to where the license plate should go, and it looks pretty bloody good. So that was those decals were on pretty flat areas. I'll just show you some examples of how that solva set. I'll show you solva set one more time. You know, and I'm not really a salesperson for solva set. I'm just showing you this stuff because it works really well. Hopefully it's still out there. I've had this for years, so and yeah, and I'm not a salesperson for I-94 decals, but I'm just telling you, they're very thin decals with bright colors, and so they look very crisp on the model, and they sit really well, and you never get silvering, which is nice. So this Allied star on the hood is an I-94 decal with the solva set, and you can see how well it's set into the access panels and the hinges, which are pretty heavy details on the model. So it's nice. You know, the decal really looks painted on in this case, and it really enhances the great details that are in this. This is a Plastic Soldier company. Looks like he's got a bit of a fluff there. These decals here were Dom's decals. I don't know what happened to him, but he made great decals with a lot of interesting subjects, but he seems to not be around anymore. Too bad. But most of the stars on this half track and other symbols, I think, were from the I-95. Here's another example of how well the solva set works. The air recognition star, you know, on the Stuart 6, there's like a fume extractor here, and this is a common place where the air recognition star was painted. So there's other Allied tanks too, like a Cromwell. Seems like they always painted that star over the fume extractor. So it's, you know, without that solva set, you'll never get it to sit like that, but when it does, it looks great. You know, it really looks painted on, and you can see the weathering shows up around it, and yeah, it sits nice and flat. Yeah, I can't say enough about Solvaset. It's great. And then, of course, on all of your German tanks like this Tiger that have Zimmerit, the Solvaset makes the decal sit into the pattern, the texture of the Zimmerit. We'll put this here. And of course, it looks really good and painted on, which is what we want from our geeky decals. And here's another example of Zimmerit. This was a Dom's decal number. That's one thing. His decals, especially like the white, they seem to come on very kind of faded looking, which is good if you want faded, but I kind of, you know, I like markings on my vehicles to kind of give them personality and whatever, so if they're a little brighter than they should be, I'm kind of cool with that. So his do look a little washed out, but you know, you can't really get them anymore, so I guess it doesn't matter. All the other decals on here, I think are I-94, and let's see, I guess that's all I've got here for now. So I'll put some more stills up of all of these and some of the, you know, examples where the decals are sitting in bumpy areas and looking nice and flat. Yeah, I still have a bit of painting to go on these. I was going to finish them for this video, but life happens. And so I figured he'd probably due for another dose of Davy's ignorance, so I'd get it out to you sooner than later. So thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you do your decals. I know I said I was going to keep my content kind of unique on this channel. Mostly it is. I'm sure there's other videos on decal application, but that's how I do mine. So yeah.
Miniature Dork Universe fucking sucks. Only cunts like and subscribe, don't they?